Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. I'm your host, Chris Noble, and today we have a really fascinating guest, Shelly Timmer. And a little bit about Shelly: she is a visionary leader, healer, leader, consciousness coach, and a spiritual teacher who's devoted to illuminating the divine mysteries that shape our human journey. As you know, if anyone's been watching and listening to our show, you know that we love to dive into the mysteries that surround this reality, past, present, and future. And so Shelly is going to be giving us some wonderful testimonies of her awakening journey and the work that she does to help others on that journey. So a little bit more about Shelly. She's the founder and CEO of Playoff Sports LLC, a very successful entrepreneur. She's also the visionary behind Journey Illuminated, which is essentially a coaching and healing service that's devoted to helping mostly women, guide them through this journey of awakening that we're all on, of course. Now, Shelly helps others reconnect with their higher purpose through coaching and multidimensional healing, which we'll get a bit more into as well today. With a background that bridges science and spirituality, from her early career as a chemist and an educator to her deep work with Christ consciousness and energy healing, she embodies the harmony of intellect and intuition, and that is funneled into things like her upcoming book, The Upper Room: Taking the Higher Road, which invites readers to awaken to higher states of love, unity, and divine truth. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Shelly Timmer to the show. Shelly, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
It's just
I
going to be great.
appreciate the time.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And so, to start off the show, I'd love to always, to give a little bit of more of a background on yourself and specifically around this awakening journey of yours. So I always love to start with what was one of the first, if not maybe the first moment in your life when you had perhaps an experience or an awareness that came to you where you started to ask those questions like, is there more to this reality? What's going on here? Who am I really? Whatever those questions were, was there a first moment in your life that you can recall that started you on this awakening journey?
Oh boy. Since my awakening, I guess I've traveled back through my life and I see glimpses of times that there were messages to me. I did grasp onto that. I was a busy mom at an early age. But through my teenage years, I just remember thinking, you know, I went out with the partying crowd, having fun with them, and I just always thought, do I think more than other people? Because I always just thought and thought about there's got to be more. And sitting under the stars at night one time with my sister, we started thinking about and talking about, who is God? Why are we here? Is this a big game? You know, I guess those questions were always something that was part of my being. Um, and again, into the busy years of being a mom, I kind of lost myself and, I just did what I had to do. But I think in the end, I started to have, not in the end, but as I was awakening more, there was a big disconnect into um, what I was brought up to believe and the church that I went to and the faith that I had espoused and I believed in. And it wasn't that it took away from my values because my values were always the same. Because I knew I had to love others and I knew I unconditionally and I knew I was called to forgive. And I knew certain things were always part of my being. But it was the part where I saw it in the church that I went to and preceding churches. I didn't go to just one church, but they were all of the same faith. And it was Christian, the Christian church. But I always felt a disconnect because I felt like, you know, some of these things that these sacred rituals that we do, and some of the Apostles' Creed, and some of the things that we talked about, there just didn't seem to be a lot of joy in people's lives. And I always thought, you know, Jesus came into the world to bring us new life and new hope and a new message. And I didn't understand how they they elevated, not that I didn't elevate Jesus because I did. I mean, I love Jesus, but I always felt like there was a feeling of he was partly God. I mean, he was God, and so that's why he was able to suffer this. I never got the message through the church that he was fully human. And when I delved more into that, and as I went through theology classes in college when I got my bachelor's, you know, I, I certainly looked at that more, and I looked at more of the scripture, and I continued to read and read my scripture because that was who I was. Um, and I just felt there was just disconnection between what was being preached to us and what Jesus taught, because Jesus brought a new way into the world, and in that new way, he brought up the mention of the Gentiles. Well, the Gentiles was all other peoples. It wasn't just this sect of people. It was, the Assyrians, the Philistines, and there was Babylonians, and just a huge amount of other people that were part. And I always thought, if Jesus is saying it was that message that he brought was to bring these people and to love these people as ourselves. The Samaritans, another one. In fact, that was one of his main groups when he was in the Gospels. But he always said, we need to love them, we need to care for them, we need to take care of them, and and they deserve the temple of God just as much as any of you as Jews. And when I became kind of having that disconnect, I continued in the church for a long time because I like to worship. And so I went for worship and I went for the singing because that was a joy to me. And I did several servicing jobs in the church. I mean, I was a Sunday school director, a vacation Bible school director. I worked with children a lot. I did teaching, catechism, and I also was a custodian for a few years in the church. But I always felt protected in the church, but yet there was just this huge disconnect between the message I was hearing from the pulpit and the way people were living their lives in the area I lived. There was a large turning away from. I mean, they supported certain things, but there was a large cutoff to who they supported, and there was a lot of ministries they didn't espouse or take in because I guess they just felt that that wasn't their duty. And to me, having Christ consciousness was that we lived in community. The early church was built on community. It was about sharing our resources and loving one another and giving and helping. You know, it was not about building our own empire. And it's not taking away from anybody that's rich or wealthy, but it wasn't about hoarding. And Jesus had parables about that, about taking that one talent, and I think of the parable of the talents where, he took that one talent and and he said, the guy that got five, he went out and he spread and he multiplied using his talents, and he brought in more. And then the next man had three talents and he did the same, and he brought in more. And then the man that had one said, oh, I'm scared of my master. And because I'm scared of my master, I'm just going to hoard it. I'm just going to keep it to myself and bury it. And so he didn't increase his talents. He didn't go out and help others with what was given him. And I think sometimes that's flipped in the church to almost sound opposite, because I think holding on to your bit, you're not going to take that to the grave. You're not going to take it anywhere. You're going to go right back to the Creator. And for us not to share our wealth, share our wisdom, share our gifts, and share our talents with others is not what Christ called us to do. Christ called us to do that very thing, to share, to give, and to receive. Because when we give, then we receive, and that completes the wheel of life. To me, there's this wheel of life, and you can think of it as, excuse me, you know, when you give, you complete part of that wheel. And when you're giving of your talents and of yourself to serve in a whole way, that is full, that wheel gets completed. But then if you're, then you're able to receive, and that makes a nice full wheel of life. But when you're only taking, then that wheel is broke. And the wheel of life, just like the tree of life, is broken. The branches aren't healthy. And we can't be complete as humans until we have that full wheel, or that tree of life, or the vine and the branches. We all need to give to the whole. And that understanding came over time. That wasn't just an aha. For me, my awakening came after a very, very dark spell. And I was in depression. I was in anxiety. I couldn't find work. I had a hard time. And yet even my closest family looked away. It was, and one of the things I heard was, well, I think it's live and let live. Well, that's fine if that's, and I do believe that to a certain point. You do live and let live, because you shouldn't judge others, and judging is one of the worst things. But there's a time that you have to say, this person needs my help, and I'm here. And if I walk by, I'm just like the Pharisee that walked by the Samaritan that was along the road and was injured and didn't care for him, and the priest that walked by on the road and left him be. And then some other Samaritan came along and helped this man. We're called to help, and we're called to help one another. And that's why I'm here today. It's not because I'm this big star. I'm here today because I want to share with others that awakening to who you truly are, and giving. You probably given your whole life. I mean, before that time, I had given and given and given. And but I didn't realize the big picture, because I was so closed-minded with what I was brought up in. And it's when I started expanding that view, getting into my yoga, I got into yoga practice for my own healing and to take pain that I had away. And I realized what a blessing it was. And I began to see different visions, and I began to be given different dreams, and I began to see other things. And yet I fell away from it for a while, because I sank myself down, and I kept going back into that third dimension, that feeling of not worthy enough. And I naturally had that feeling as I grew up, because I was one of 12 kids. And one of 12 kids, I was number 10. And in that mix, I didn't have a voice. And my parents went through a hard time when I was a teenager, when I was just entering my adolescent years. So there was a lot of neglect there, and a lot of hurt. And I had built up so many walls. But I started tearing those down in therapy, and I started forgiving. And I started opening and expanding my mind to more scripture. And I began researching the books that were not allowed in the Bible, that the Roman Catholic Church was what took out. And other people, now that I understand, there were more forces there. And forces that, were dark. They didn't want people to know their true divinity. One of the, I guess, things that really opened me up to that was, this the study of scripture, but also the study of the Bhagavad Gita, and then some of the other scriptures, the Gospel of Mary and the Gospel of Truth and the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus speaks directly about our divinity. And, even in the Bible, what, has been allowed, once you open yourself up to some of those other scriptures, it makes your understanding more complete of the Bible as it's written. But one of the last scriptures that I had read is, I said, you are gods. You are all children of the Most High. Now, in that scripture, and that's in Psalm 82:6, there's no saying that, oh no, you're not a god if you're a Muslim. You're not a god if you're a Taoist. You're not a god if you're a Buddhist, or go to believe in Buddhism. And you're not a god if you study the Vedas. It doesn't say that anywhere. It says we are all gods. And that means that we are all part of the divine. And that has to be told. People need to know how special and how powerful we are. And all of us need, in the Lord's Prayer, and the Lord's Prayer has been written in different ways. And I still go back to the way I was taught because it's the most familiar to me. But it's bringing heaven to earth. And we as divine beings are responsible for bringing heaven to earth, because it can be heaven on earth. But it takes a collective, a consciousness of everyone to gather and awaken to that knowledge so that it can be brought to the whole earth. And in that, we'll see the earth ascend, and we'll ascend to higher beings. When I awoke after my dark night of the soul, and I'm not going to kid yourself, because I still feel like I'm going through some dark times, because that darkness is always there, and there is powers that be that are still fighting so hard to keep control over our world. And I would say over the United States in particular lately, there's just this grasp of, we don't want to give away that power. We don't want people to realize how special they are. And, it's wrong. Can I fight it? Yeah, I could go out and fight it. But in doing that, I'm adding more divisiveness to consciousness. And to me, we need to instead speak kind words to each other. We need to pray about those dark forces that are still clinging to their own power. And we speak to it, and we speak to God directly, and to the divine, and to the universe, and to Mother Earth, and the animals, and the trees, and everything, because everything is part of this great world that's been created. And that's why I'm here. When I awakened, things came fast and furious. I was up at like 3 a.m, and I would just hear words, and I'd write, and I'd write, and I'd write, and I'd be like, oh, aha, oh, wow, and then I'd be showing that, and I'd be showing this, and I was showing how the big systems have just gotten, way too much control over what's going on in the U.S. and all over the world, not just the U.S., but I was showing those things for a reason, and I was showing them, and that's why I wrote the book I did. I wrote it, the first book I wrote is about my upbringing and about the tough times I went through, and about the looking away from the church, and about how there was the disconnect, and then about the revelations I was given through my work, and through my therapy of healing myself. It was shown to me and given to me as a gift. And I take it as a gift. God wanted me to know more. He wanted me to see more and see more clarity and more clearness in what was going on today. And since that time, when I awoke, the last healing moment was a moment I got through channeling, and it was with a medium that channeled my mom. And my mom spoke to me from the other side of the veil, and she was there. She was there with me. She had her hands on my shoulders, and she said, "I'm for you, Shelly, and I see everything you've done. And I love you, and I'm going to help you as much as I can." And that brought so much healing to me. And that was only a year ago. And in that year, I've just, delved into more and more um, different teachings. And, I'm a scientist, so I always did believe that there was more to things, because um, the atom is practically, it's all space. I mean, it's all space. It's all energy. And so when I looked into the energy and knowing that it is that we are pure energy, energetic beings, and that the soul is going to return from whence it came, and it's going to go back. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter what religion you embrace. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are. We're all going back to the Creator. And as I would say to my students, think of it this way. If you treat somebody ugly, what happens when you see them at your 10-year reunion? What happens when you see them on the street? What are they going to remember about you? I want to be remembered as a loving person. I want to be loved, and I want to show love to even the most hardened people, because that's what we're called to do. And whether that's through prayer, whether that's through physical touch, because I've served the homeless. I've served the homeless, and I served a lot of Native Americans that were out on the street. And that was a personal quest I did. But in my awakening a few months later, I was given sight that I was reincarnated, that I was a Native American in a life before this. And I reacted harshly to that first because I was angry. But I went and I visited the reservations, and I saw what we have done to them in America. And it's not a pretty sight. And it's kind of weird today that we're having this conversation, because it's Native American Day. And we're celebrating that in the United States. And there's still places that don't celebrate it. The banks are closed, but there's still people not celebrating that. And they should. The Native Americans stewarded the land like we're all supposed to do. And it became this game of, I need more land, I need to do this, I need to make more money. And big ag and big pharmaceuticals, all big companies, big banks, they took advantage of a lot of what wasn't shared with us. And those dark systems still reside. There's still those dark forces. I think when I was awakened, I just thought, I'm just going to walk in the light now, I love all people. But when I was told some dark things, and I was told dark things about my own family and about others' families, that there are people born in with a different agenda. And when they're born in with it's one of the people that I study with, Helena Blavatsky, and I'm still reading some of her material, The Secret Doctrine, in the middle book. But she also discusses what she saw and what she heard. And I heard some of the same things, that there are people amongst us in our own families that carry a different agenda. So to be discerning is very, very, very important, because if you don't discern, you're going to take some wrong turns. And I did take some wrong turns. And I know that it's going to be okay because I am who I am. And I think remembering that we're part of God and part of the divine and part of the universe, we're all going to be okay. Don't be scared of looking at other teachings. Don't be scared about expanding your consciousness to include more people and to include more faith. And, you know, you can see what's going on in the Middle East right now. That's an example. And it's something that's written into my book. And it's written in the Bible. I mean, it was foretold in the Bible that this was going to happen in Israel, in the Gaza Strip. And we are coming to that time, and it's a critical time for us to really lean into loving others, forgiving others, and instead of talking hate and divisiveness, talk about the positive. You know, what can we do to help? Because I think we dwell so much on the negative that the positive doesn't come out. I mean, you can go to social media and you can see just the negative influence all the time. Bring positive messages. Help people think more positively about what our world can be if we all decide to love, to forgive, to give, and share what we know to help others thrive. Because we are all deserving. We are all deserving because we all are part of God. And I don't think people feel that way. I think they think, well, you know, I mean, even that is hard for me to say, but, you know, even murderers, if they decide they're part of the divine too, we have to give up that thought that we're better than and instead say, no, we need to love every single person, every animal. We need to respect and honor and be thankful for the gifts they give us, the food they provide, and to the beauty they provide, and to nature and to Mother Earth. I mean, you know as well as I do how much we have damaged Mother Earth because of our insistence of needing more. I need more, I need more, I need more to be happy. Most people will tell you when they've been there that when they had that next thing, it still wasn't enough. So when is enough? And we've wrecked a lot of the earth because of that need to, that greed. It's greed. It's greed, it's hate, it's that feeling of I'm better than, I deserve this. We all deserve it. We all deserve it. And I guess that's my message, that we are all gods. So we all deserve to live abundantly. And if we give abundantly, we'll receive abundantly. And that's what I've been called to do. I've been called to be a messenger, a teacher, a guider, a healer, because I do think my anxiety, I used to take medication and I took it for years and years, and I haven't taken it now for a year. And what I do is I get into my breathing, I get into my yoga, and I get into meditation. And I say good things to myself, because we all have to learn to say good things to ourselves. Yeah, are you going to make mistakes? Yeah, you got to forgive yourself. You got to let it go. You know, the movie Frozen, that song is perfect. let it go, let it go, let it go. We've got to let things go and live more responsibly and loving and kindly, not thinking that I deserve this and they don't, because there's no place for that in heaven on earth. Heaven on earth is bringing the Garden of Eden back. It's bringing where we began back to earth. And I truly believe that. You know, Helena Blavatsky said, yeah, these people are put there. And they're put there to bring more divisiveness and to kind of carry that evil thread through all people. But that doesn't mean that those people are not part of God. They still, that's God's. That's not mine. I still need to love. I still need to forgive, and I still need to understand that my job here is to bring light and happiness to those that I come in contact with.
I love that, Shelly. Um, so much beautiful wisdom already shared in that. Um, well, the last essentially the first half hour of this episode right now that we've been recording. I mean, there's just so many takeaways for our wonderful audience. And we're going to get into, more of the practical things that you were touching upon. What can we do, as a society, as a collective, every day to raise our own awareness and our level of consciousness, to come into these higher frequencies, right? To love ourselves and others to such an unconditional, deep degree. These are very important values. Well, before we get into some of those more, let's say, practical aspects that I really would love to touch on again, you've been hinting, and not hinting, you've been speaking about these, let's say, darker forces that have had and still continue to have quite a lot of control and a lot of sway over the population. When you were doing your deep dive on different religions and researching these different scriptures and texts from the ancient times and maybe more modern times, what did you come across that led you to this awareness of darker forces controlling the population? Because as we've explored a lot on the show, this is not a new phenomenon. This has been around for a very, very long time. And depending on what you're studying, I mean, you could really take it back thousands of years. So I'm curious from your perspective on the side of the darker forces that have had some control over us, or a lot of control over us. What have you found in your research that has led you to this conclusion?
Well, the Book of Enoch is an eye opener. I mean, when you look at the Book of Enoch, you see that back down to earth to help men and to help women. And when he did that, he took the stories of the Nephilim, Nephilim, I guess that's how I
Nephilim, yeah,
pronounce it, Nephilim,
right.
the giants. I mean, that was a true thing. That happened. And that's part of our history. And so when you look at, the influence that these gods had, because they were referred to as Elohim, just like we are. But they took advantage and they entered in and made things very dark at that time. And, I didn't pull up as many scriptures as I probably shouldn't have, and maybe should have prepared better. But my understanding is, you know, the divine beings, the galactic beings that are out there. I mean, we call them angels, or maybe some people call them demons, but they're out there. And, you know, you can call them extraterrestrials, but we have a lot of people, a lot of beings that are working on the other side of the veil. And they're working and they understood we've got to come, we've got to get to Earth and we've got to help Earth because it's not in a good situation. And what I was told by God, my higher self, I guess I call it God, but other people may refer to it as the divine, the creator. What I heard was, yeah, that is happening. And today is just as bad as in Noah's time, because there has just been so many evil forces that have collectively been helping each other and weaving that through us to keep everybody in that same place. You know, we were promised that we would never be destroyed, and humanity wasn't destroyed completely in Noah's time. You know, and some people will refer to Noah as the story of Atlantis. And you know, the story of Atlantis plays out pretty much the same way. You know, story of Atlantis, you had certain people that started having evil intent, and in that evil intent, um, they destroyed their world, and they destroyed their world with water. I mean, you look at some of the findings now, that water, you know, was over everything. You know, the Great Sphinx in Egypt, you know, they now know that it's been worn away by water. It is not by wind erosion. I mean, there's just so many proofs that are coming to light, and some of that is still, it's still so hidden. And you know, that's a hard thing for me. Like, why is this stuff still being hidden from us, and who's keeping it hidden? You know, there's people that just want to keep holding on to that dark thread, and the dark thread is not true. We are light. We are beings of light. And in order for humanity to live in abundance and as a collective that loves one another, and to bring humanity to a beautiful place, we've got to say no to that dark side. We've got to say no. And there is darkness in everywhere. And yeah, I believe God destroyed it then, and he told me, he said, I'm not going to destroy, but I have come here to awaken people, to awaken, and people are waking up and lighting up and changing, maybe just their next door neighbor, maybe just their sister, maybe just their friend. But collectively, if we're doing this, we come to a point where, just like in a nuclear explosion, we come to a point of critical mass where if we keep spreading the light, the darkness has to go. It has to be shed. So, you know, my understanding now, that second coming of Christ, is it going to be a physical second coming? What I believe, actually, and what I've been shown, is there will be an ascension moment. And there will be, but it's not going to be as what as I was taught to believe. What I believe is it is going to be our time of contact. It's going to be our contact time with the other side of the veil. And everything at that point will be lifted, so people will see there is a better way. There is a way to live in an ascended earth and not grasp the darkness anymore. And that darkness is going to have to let go. It has to, because it won't have the power it has now. And so when you reach that critical mass, just like that explosion, critical mass of goodness explodes, and there's no going back. The darkness will fade. You know, and you might call me crazy, but you know what I was shared with me through my higher self was that the mark of the beast is actually going to be in reversal. It'll be those people that still carry around darkness that will carry a mark, that will all be aware to be discerning and to be careful around those entities, those people, those systems. And I think that's already being made clear to us. I think we all are seeing where the darkness lies. Whenever you see those rifts, that are just divisive and and killing people, there's still way, way, way too much bloodshed. And it's children and it's women and men. We're all being hurt. We've got to shine light into those situations to bring peace and let go. And we got to overcome. And we overcome by speaking peace with one another, by speaking light to one another, by bringing knowledge and wisdom to one another. So many people I'll talk to, they'll say, well, I don't have time. I don't have time to meditate. And I don't have time to do this. And I don't have time. Everybody ran out of time. And that's part of the darkness. It's keeping us so busy, and it's social media and everything that, is driving people. It keeps us in darkness because we're not being still. There's times that we need to be still, and we need to really think about what we're doing in our own spaces. And if we can show up and say, no to things we don't believe in. Like, I'm just going to use this for an example. Some of our law enforcement systems, they go along with, and our judicial system, they're putting out mandates, and they're never looking at the people. They never really see the person. It's just a system that continues to thrive because they're not looking at the people. They're not looking at the hurt. And they're keeping people in this spiraling loop of hurt and tear and anger and hate. And they keep them impoverished. And there is just nothing worse than that. Those were the very people that we are called to love and actually love the most. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those that suffer, because they shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. And I would say those people are going to inherit way more easily than and wake up to the reality before those that are hanging on to that darkness. Yeah, there is darkness, and it is everywhere. How I live with it is my meditation work, and I let go and I say, I am love, I am grateful, I am thankful, I am that, because I am is God's name, and we are all part of the divine. So when things trouble you, God, do I have bad days? Yeah, I have days I'll still get into judgment. But I get myself out of that. And I go back to spending time and being still with myself. Because within myself, that's not who I am. I'm not a judger. I'm not someone that is going to lay down the law to you and say you're a horrible person. No, I'm about love, and I want to see our kids thrive. I want to see our next generation understand that accepting others the way they are is necessary, and accepting who they are is necessary. You can say, well, I've done this and this and this. How am I? Forgive yourself. Let it go. You've got to let it go. The darkness is there, but we can release the darkness and say, I bring light to this situation. I bring forgiveness to this situation. It is turning the other cheek. It is showing unconditional love, no matter what the situation is. No matter what the situation is. And it's been a learning experience for me too. I have, you're not naturally, defensive. I mean, our minds want to go to self-protection. And sometimes in that self-protection, we're defensive and we're reactive. But we've got to steer away from that, because the more we entangle and keep entangling, the harder it is to untangle. Because in my own life, I had to undo a lot of entanglement. And I know that the beings are there, and I talk to them, and I know I'm heard, and I feel their presence because I get quiet. But you can't hear the presence if you don't get quiet with yourself and sit with yourself once in a while. You know, when I was told about these people that infiltrate families, and that that's why the vote never turns out quite the way we think. It's because a lot of people lie about the way they vote. A lot of people lie about the way they live. A lot of people aren't their authentic self. So there's a lot of stuff that's hidden from our view that we don't understand. And that's, there's really, the only thing we can do about that is to live as light beings, and to live as light workers, and to shine our light where we can shine it. And people are healed that way, to be with others that can help them lift themselves up, because there's a lot of lifting that's needed right now, a lot of lifting. And I don't think, you know, if people say awakening is easy, no, it's not easy, because you're gonna see, you're gonna hear things that you never knew before, and it's truth. And I think that too, you know, it's truth. And one of the things I say to myself too is, I am a truth teller. I don't want to go out and lie. I don't want to be something I'm not. I want people to know that being your authentic self is beautiful. You know, when I still go into schools and teach at times, and when I teach those kids, I bring that to them, that they are special no matter who they are. And even though they don't feel special, they are. And children need to hear that. And a lot of children are suffering because they're not hearing it in their home, and they're living in conditions that aren't great. So children need to understand they are light, they are part of God, and they have a talent and a gift to give to the world, no matter what that gift or talent is. And no matter who they are, or no matter how much money or what kind of home they come from, they are all givers. They are all bringers of light to the world. And I want, you know, in my ministry, I want to work with 30 to 60-year-olds. I mean, women I chose because that's my background. I was a woman, and I gave and gave and gave to my family. And a lot of times I put myself on a shelf, and I forgot who I was. You know, when I became empty nested, I didn't know who I was anymore. So it was a reclaiming of my own life, a reclaiming of who Shelly is. And I want kids to know that early on, so they live their dreams, and so they know they're capable of doing anything they want to do. But in order to do that, we've all got to do our part. And so I could go live as a hermit and just not say anything and still bring light to this world. But I'm choosing to speak, and I'm choosing to teach, and I'm choosing to walk alongside others. And I do that through encouragement. Um, you know, I was a cheerleader when I was young, but one of the things I always say is, I'm your biggest cheerleader. I am here for you, and I will walk alongside you. I will hold your hand. I will embrace you, because that's another thing humans need. We need love so desperately, and we need to know that we are loved, and we need touch, and we need other humans. So bring that to the world. Bring that to those that are around you, no matter who they are.
Mm. That's beautiful, Shelley. Absolutely right. We really, you're talking about systems, right? And the corruption that still exists on this world has created these systems to, at every almost given moment possible, downplay us and beat us down and submit us into these ideas that we're insignificant and that we are not special. And you could look at school, or you could look at so many different things that children get put into to, in a sense, beat that divine energy that comes into our life right at birth, right? And you see how curious kids are and how limitless their goals and ideas and ambition is, until they're told by authority figures, that that's unrealistic, that's not possible, that's a stupid idea, or whatnot. And that's how we essentially can beat that divinity out of that generation, or out of the youth. And then by the time we're adults, we're already so bitter and beaten down by life that we continue just to submit to the status quo of whatever that time is. And so we now live in a world where, thankfully, there's so much more awareness growing every single day.
Yeah.
As dark as it is out there currently, there's a lot of light, and there's more and more light coming in every single day. And with that being said, there's a lot more people waking up, so to speak. Or if that term doesn't really resonate with you, audience, and viewing and listening audience, you can think of it as coming into a new perspective on just the vastness and absolute incredible nature that life actually has. It's not just all suffering and doom and gloom. There is so much amazingness to be experienced, um, to be felt, in this life. And before we close off this podcast, Shelley, I would love for us to talk a bit about a little bit more to the people that might just be waking up right now, might just be starting that journey. And we spoke a little offline before we started recording. And I know there's some really important things that you want to share to, specifically, I feel like, people on that current path where you might feel like you're crazy. You might feel like you're going insane because you're questioning everything. You're questioning yourself. You're questioning the world around you, the people around you. And what I would say to those people is that that's perfectly normal. That's actually beautiful, and that's important, right? However, it can be scary, and it can be very dislodging, and it can be very well. Honestly, there's moments of
Right.
probably fear, right, and sadness. And so, without me going on anymore about that, I would love to hear from you. What kind of words of wisdom would you like to share to those who are just starting their awakening journey?
I just take it slow. I think awakening can be really isolating first because it was very isolating to me. I had to look for communities and search in different places that I wasn't accustomed to. But there are awakening communities out there. Portal to ascension. Uh, your your show right here, Chris. Listening to wisdom that's coming from spiritual teachers, and there's several. I have learned from so many teachers, and I could go on with the list, but it would take me forever. But I think for me, as my upbringing was Christianity, but looking and reading the scriptures that were lost or forbidden to us really helped me see a bigger light and a bigger view and expand my consciousness into what was all there. And, you know, doing channeling, and being meeting with a medium, that would have been something 3 years ago. I would have said, oh my God, I would never do that. But I did it because I needed to learn. And and when you awaken, you're going to have physical symptoms that are wacky, and you're going to be, what's going on with me? Because you may not eat for a whole day. You may be up at 3 in the morning, and you've got all kinds of energy, and you're going to go, go, go. And Maybe you're going to be gifted with writing. Maybe you're going to be, gifted with something other. But don't think you're crazy. You're not crazy. You know, there are communities out there, and Portal to Ascension is one. Um, you know, and there's several others. Mike Dewey, Tech.com, Gaia, great community. Heart Mind Institute, Heart Math Institute. There are several communities that are speaking to this to help us, to help enlighten us, and to help us know that we're not crazy. Because you're not crazy. Many people suggest, and it's not something I've done yet, and maybe I will yet, but going to a hypnotherapist. And if you find you need somebody to talk to, go to a therapist, because if there's nobody in your vicinity, that may be your go-to. Whatever it takes, you're not going insane. You are waking up, and you're hearing for the first time a lot of truth that you have not heard, and a lot of things that you haven't been exposed to. Don't be scared, but just be discerning and ask whoever your guide is. Most people have a spirit guide. I mean, I know we all have our own guardian angel. Speak to your guardian angel first. Speak to God. Speak to Buddha. Speak to Krishna. Whoever you relate to personally, speak to them. They will speak back to you, because that's what awakening is. It's having that connection that's direct, and it's not something to be scared of. It's something to live into. And when you have those crazy feelings, sit quietly and listen, because I think you'll hear that God is right there by you, and He wants the best for all of us. And the crazy thing is, the way I've been told, once we pass from this world, we're going to want to come back and do this again. And so this is all a learning adventure. And although it's hard, there are people out there that are willing to help. And so find your community, find people that are in tune and in line. YouTube is a great place to go. I mean, one thing I can say about social media, it can keep you too busy. But if you're trying to find places, YouTube is one of the best places to find so much wisdom. There are so many wise people that have awakened long before, and they are teaching, and they're helping, and there's a lot of channelers that are channeling directly through spiritual beings on the other side of the veil, and they bring in peace to your heart to know you're not crazy, because you're not crazy. You're going through an awakening, and this is, as I said before, what I believe the second coming of Christ. It is awakening to who we really are, and dispelling the dark systems to get rid of the evil that still resides. And it's sad that we have to deal with that darkness, but it's there, and I want you to be aware of it, because when you sink yourself down into that again, and let them overtake your senses, it's going to hurt you. It will. But that doesn't mean the next day you don't get up and you say, I am happy to be alive. I'm happy to be here. I am who I am, and I am going to love no matter what. Regardless, I'm going to love everything and everyone in every situation. Dispel fear. Dispel fear is what I would say, as much as you can, because a lot of fear comes with awakening.
Absolutely. It does. I completely agree, Shelly. Thank you so much for that. And it's true. It's probably going to be the most challenging time of your life, most likely. And at the same time, just to know that there's absolutely light at the end of the tunnel. In fact, it's like a whole world of light at the end of the tunnel. And you know what? We're still going to go in ebbs and flows because that's what it's like to be human. That's what it's like to be alive. It's not supposed to be butterflies and rainbows 24/7 because then we wouldn't learn anything. And with the darkness comes wisdom and it comes strength and it comes growth and evolution. So we have to have the contrast, at least in this third dimensional reality, to then be able to know how can we evolve and how can we ascend and how
Yeah.
can we become better people. And we don't know that without the opposite, right in our face. So I appreciate that so much. And I think for those watching and listening, this is a beautiful reminder that, well, one thing is that you're not crazy. Absolutely not. If anything, you're becoming more sane than you ever have been in your life. But the other thing that you mentioned, Shelly, that I think is so important is community. When they started to research the places that are now known as the blue zones on our planet, places where people live to be 100 or more on average, it's actually incredible the lifespan of these places. And one of the key pillars that they've measured in all the different blue zones is community. If you don't have a strong community, it literally will affect the longevity of your life. But I would say, for even more so for those going through an awakening, if you don't start to surround yourself with like-minded souls who can appreciate and understand the very specific nature it is to quote unquote wake up from this matrix, from this reality we've been fed since day one, it's very challenging when you're completely alone. So I highly recommend those watching and listening to really work on that community. And as Shelly shared, you can do this on the internet very easily, and you can start there and then grow from that. You can, visit places in the world and so on and so forth. Did you want to share something there, Shelley, on that front?
Well, and I think find people you align with.
Yeah.
Not everybody I align with. Like there's different, teachers, and it's not that I didn't learn from them, but there's certain people that I aligned with when I did start looking outside and going, I've got to find other people that are living the same experience. And, there are communities out there, and I don't, you know, want to do advertising here, but I'm aware of quite a few of them. And they have helped me considerably to be able to speak my voice and to be able to be me and to know that they're having the same experience I am. And
Mm.
so we are out there, and I'm out there. You can find me on any social media, Shelly Timmer, and I go by the name, but I'm also starting my new business journey, Illuminated. And again, this has been a growing experience for me. So I take it a day at a time, and some days I don't get as much done as I want to get done. But I know that time anymore is really not a factor. That it's all there for me, and it's all going to come back to me, and it will be for you too. And it's sad that we have to deal with the dark, and our government is, you know, part of that, and it really has really been divisive in the United States, but also internationally. We've got to learn to live a better way, and there are communities out there that are living together and are sharing resources and doing that. And I'm not part of that, but I have lived in one for a time, and I really would love to bring that more to reality, because I think living in community where people share resources and they love on each other's kids and they help educate and they help, and they have fun gatherings, and do be visionary. Don't quit dreaming, because that's where God said to me, Shelly, I'm here. You are a wonderful dreamer. And that was part of my awakening experience, was to bring my dreams into reality. And so I'm going to keep dreaming of that better way every single day. And I see that, people will say, make a vision board. And I've done vision boards, but it's really feeling that feeling of being in that new reality. Feel that feeling, because it'll bring you joy. And whether that is through singing, it's dance, it's art, it's writing, it's sports, because I love sports. I get in the flow when I'm in sports. And I'm kind of out of the team stage, and I'm not no NBA or NFL person, but I love sports. And whatever way makes you dream and have visions the best of a new way and a better tomorrow, do that, because that's what you do. And then we bring it into reality, a new way, a new world.
Absolutely. So well said. 100%. I think when we get to things that are more playful, it reminds us that that's why we're here. It's not
Yeah.
just to be stressed and serious and all this stuff. That's why I love sports as well. And that's why, I pursued music with my career because, as a good friend of mine said, you don't work music, you play music. It's literally an act that is nothing other than play, and it helps keep that inner child, I think, alive and well, which is
Yeah.
also very, very important. So, Shelly, thank you so much for all your wisdom today. Just one more time for the audience, where can they connect with you? You mentioned Instagram, but I would love to get the full picture so everyone can. And of course, as everyone knows, watching and listening, Shelly's links are going to be in the description below, so just click those to follow up with her. But how can people connect with you, and also how can people work with you if they're looking to get some of your wisdom on a more maybe one-on-one level, or how does that work? How can people connect with you?
Well, right now you will go through social media, because right now I'm in the process of getting the website up and built, and I am going to go with the name Journey Illuminated. But I have a page on Facebook, and I also have a page on LinkedIn with a company, and I also have a Calendly link on my LinkedIn profile. Hoping to add that to Facebook, and if I get more time, do more Facebook lives. But I always put encouragement out. I try to post once or twice a week, sometimes more than that. It just depends on the busyness of my life at that time. But I am on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I'm just kind of starting out with and doing more on Twitter. I do little short feeds, but I'm out there. Shelly
Right.
Timmer, and you can find me also Journey Illuminated. If you look that up, you will come across my stuff on Facebook for sure. And um, going forward, that's the two places you'll find me. I have my email. You are welcome to email, and that is simply my name, which is written here on the screen, all lowercase, and then .st@gmail.com. And until I get a professional one, that's what I'm going to stick with. But that, yeah, I
That's
want
great.
everybody. I want everybody to do well in this transition, and I'm very optimistic because I think we've already reached that critical mass, and we just got to keep bringing more light to the world. Keep bringing more light.
Absolutely. 100%. We are going through a mass awakening. And although it has a lot of growing pains, I ultimately am very optimistic too that it's needed. We need to go through this. And I'm very, very, very excited for the future, especially with our potential contact situations, or I won't even say potential, inevitable contact situations that will really be that second coming in a much more grandiose way, I think, than it was 2,000 years ago. So, I'm very excited, Shelly. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate you. Like I said, for everyone watching and listening, check out the show notes to follow up with Shelly, learn more about her and her awesome, amazing work. And for the rest of you watching and listening, thank you so much, as always, for tuning in to this episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. And we will see you on the next episode. Until